the jewels and the costume and the make-believe were all very real from the very beginning. And I think it was merely a part of the aesthetic, in a sense that as you go and as you experience stage, at that time, I mean, I think I'd had maybe 4 years of dancing before I joined the company. So it really was all very new, and I had no idea what it was to be a dancer at that time. And so I was really sort of every step along the way was learning, and I think it's only when you actually start to live the life that then you can start to articulate it. So I think that's how you get there, is just by living it.
Is it more real on the stage than in real life? I mean, I've seen, quite a few years ago there was a study done that showed that couples, on an average week, an average couple had 15 minutes of significant conversation. And, you know, with text messaging, we're probably down to, what, 3.5, 5 minutes. and those two couples that you and Rex portrayed tonight, I mean, more was spoken there than I would think in a month with a normal couple. I mean,
I guess what you're trying to say is ultimately is the moment on stage is highly intensified, of course, but for me what it is, it's because it's like being under a microscope, and it's bright, both of you are pulling for that one instant. For me, it's not really so much only the performance, I like to live every minute like that, because I feel as if every minute that I don't live like that is a minute that I've lost. So if I can, every single minute that I'm given this privilege of being inside of this body, listening to music, being able to express myself, whether it be in rehearsal, whether it be out on the street walking, whether it be conversing, whether it be whatever it is, if I can be the most authentic and the most loving and the most generous and the most compassionate and the most full in every single second. So the stage is just, it adds that electrical moment where you're in front of an audience, and therefore it's sort of like this combustion, because of course it's the audience's energy as well as your partner's energy, as well as usually the musician's energy and the people backstage and everyone coming together. And of course the more people that you bring into the whole equation, the greater the compounded reaction is going to be. So I think it's, for me, that's really what it is. It may not be like that for everybody else, but that's really what it is for me.
Rex, what's your take on this? Because I watch you very carefully, and here you are in UNSPOKEN, and the character is very tender. You're echoing almost like a light echo of your full movement, your full expressions. They're echoing them all the time. You're behind her. There's a tenderness in everything you do, even in DECORUM E. There's still a tenderness in the way you handle Evelyn. Is there a dichotomy for you? Is there a trick to bridging those things where you have to look after her but still create that relationship?
I think I respond. You know, first of all, it's the music, and then tonight I did DECORUM slightly different. I did it Evelyn's way. Because she thought I was too abusive right from the beginning. So tonight I was a little more sensitive. But tonight I was mostly worried, I don't know if you noticed, that my pants popped on the first thing, so I kept pulling it down all night. So that was my biggest concern tonight about being sensitive. But she just thought I wanted to take my pants off. Oh, well, it's better than the splitting ends there.
I was your character getting irritated.
It was, so I used it. Method acting. No, it really dictates within the music and the choreography, and I think that, UNSPOKEN, it's a complex piece, and when we first worked on it, we've sort of changed and modified, and I really didn't think it was the greatest choreography in the world, but then I thought what we've evolved it to and thought about musically and found things that, I watched it because it was televised for CBC. We did it for the Queen's Gala, so there's a tape of it from Roy Johnson Hall. And when I watched the tape, I found it quite moving, and I have friends who watch it, and they're all quite choked up at the end of it, and I don't quite understand it. But that's why, it is this relationship that goes on, and I think it's very tender within the music. And in DECORUM, the problem is the music compels you to do more, and so it's fighting that sort of urge. And tonight, I tried to hold back, and I think Evelyn enjoyed it more. See?
Well, it's interesting, we've been talking all week about this idea of relationships, and there is that tenderness in the way that you handle her. Is that part of the basis of how you create this astonishing partnership?
I think it comes from a sense of trust and respect. And I think that Rex is, of course, just an extraordinary partner. I mean, he has the physical capability of knowing how to put me down.
And if you don't get it right the first time, you'll be rehearsing it for another 10 hours. So you gotta get it right. It never stops.
But you see, you have the reputation of being the best partner.
Well, you beat it into me.
Yes, more.
Who would like to jump in?
I was going to say, you think they're an old married couple, not us. Questions?
Well, we probably spent more time together.
Yeah.
15 years.
No? Nobody wants to ask anything?
Great, bar's open.
Yes, somebody at the back. Way at the back.
Evelyn and Rex, you have such a graceful legacy. It's wonderful. I've been watching you both for like 20 years, and tonight's performance, as you know, as a dance lovers, it was fantastic. Like, it's so wonderful what you do. And I wanted to ask you, Rex, if someone were to ask you of your finest memories of living at 63 Oakwood Avenue South in Port Credit.
Oh, no.
I knew you were here.
Commuting to the National Ballet School of Canada every morning.
I didn't like that commute, and Pierre Purdy was insane, wasn't he?
Year.
It's good to see you.
What's the finest memory of that? It must have been special.
Of living in Oakville? Amway products.
Credit.
It was Port Credit. It was almost Oakville, though.
I lived in Port Credit.
No, I had to live there when they were building the school, the Ottmans.
It was a wonderful memory. It was a great time, and congratulations to both of your successes.
Thank you.
You know, I just wanted to make a little comment about what was so great about, for me anyway, tonight, is that with each performance that you get to do, you get more comfortable with your environment. And what's the most amazing thing is to be able to stand on stage and look into Rex's eyes. And it's not that either of you are trying to do anything, it just is. And each step goes with the next one, and there's this trust and this sort of you both do what you have to do to keep going, and there's nothing like it. I mean, it's like a really good marriage at that point. It's just, you thank God for that, because it's just, and you just think to yourself, it can't possibly not show. Because that's the one time when it's really given back.
So touching.
Yeah, it's that really good marriage part, though. It's the high, the in-between times. Because, I asked Rex this the other night. You know, in conventional marriages, it's usually the guy who gets blamed if something screws up. And I wondered whether it wasn't the same for him, because, he's sort of in an odd position. He can make his female partner look better than she is. Not Evelyn, but somebody else, obviously. But if anything goes wrong, we're all sitting here, we're going to say, yeah, it was the guy, wasn't it? It was, he let her slip. That's a huge responsibility, and it's also, I know it comes with the territory, but how do you negotiate? You said tonight, okay, you're doing it Evelyn's way. How does the negotiation take place?
There isn't any negotiation. There just isn't. It's Evelyn's way, and that's right. Just like in life, Take out the trash. Let the dog out to pee.
But I just was going to say, the thing that makes Rex extraordinary is that he comes from the premise that the way he was trained was the fact that the partner takes the responsibility, that it is his fault. And a lot of schools don't necessarily train that way. So you go into a rehearsal and you'll see, I'll never forget once I was working with Alicia Markova, and I was doing... Did she? Oh dear. And she was an amazing person to work with. And we were doing Les Sophies, and I was being carried from the wing to the center, and she gave me the correction that I wasn't going far enough. And I looked at her and went, how can I do anything about it? Like, he's carrying me. And so, dear, you have to get farther from the wings. You're not coming in far enough. And I'm going, okay, how do I get there? And I think that this is the thing, is there's a lot of people that really do. They look at the girl and they only see the girl, whereas if the partner is the one who assumes the responsibility, you can oftentimes get far faster and far more advanced in what you're trying to do, because ultimately it's that it's the fact is that the woman is creating most of the time, especially in classical ballet, she's creating the line of usually the melody, and she's creating the line, and it's the partner who is assisting her. That's why it's saying partnering. But I think with Rex and I, what we try to do is have the two of us dancing equally, so that's what makes Rex extraordinary, is that he's able to dance as well as partner. He's not just standing there. You'll see a lot of young partners very, very kind of stiff and terrified, and that's the wonderful thing about Rex, is that he moves and he breathes and he expresses himself as equally, and that's fantastic.
One of the things that moves me most about dance is the way that it's so transient. It happens and it's gone, and it'll never happen again that way. And none of us are here for very long, and dance sort of epitomizes that. It gives us a sense of defying the passage of time and also defining it. And I wonder, when you dance, both of you, are you aware of that transience, and do you play to that, or is it just once happening and then it's gone for you?
I think the only thing I can say is that at that moment it's full blown, and you're in it 100%, and it's not a matter of time. It's not a matter of the past, future. It's just that moment, and so it's not playing, and you're not thinking. And that's one of the reasons too why just personally, I'm just going to put this in a personal, why I abhor this whole idea of being forced to say when I'm going to retire and when my last performance is, because I don't want to know. I don't want to start my performance knowing that I'm never going to do this again, even if I never will, even if there's a slight thought in the back of my head, because when I come onto the stage, I want it to be full and real and not defined by what I did before or what I will do tomorrow, but what I do right now. And that's it. And who I am as a human being right now, who I am as an artist right now, who I'm dancing with right now. And it's it's one of the things that I feel that for all the hard work that every artist really deserves to be able to have, is that, to be able to own that moment on the stage.
Right?
What was the question?
Is the bar open? What was the question? Well, for me, it's yeah. I mean, my retirement, well, my demise from the National Ballet was announced like a year in advance. So I had a year of last performances, and so it got to be a bit tiresome. That every time I stepped on the stage, I thought, okay, this is my last Onegin. But the thing about the art form is that it's. You do it, and it's there at the moment, and then it goes away. And I'm still dancing. I just left the National Ballet, so I didn't think I would be doing these shows. So, there's all sorts of things that I can keep doing. It really, that's what, is frustrating about the art form, and that's what makes it so amazing, is that it is all of us in the space at the moment, and it's not something that, that's why I envy actors who have their whole career on a record of it. And just that little film of me, and there's 4 seasons that's filmed, and Evelyn and I dancing nuage, those little things out of a 20-year career are amazing to have on film, to think that you've left behind something, but we all remember dancers as in our minds, and so in that way it's sort of special, because people can remember Nijinsky, or they can remember Pavlova, but everyone can have their own interpretation of what that was. So it's hard to think when the end is or when to get off, and it's a question that will always be asked, but it just depends on, I think, the culture and where you are. And I think, in Canada, certainly we don't revere artists as much, or older artists as much, as European companies do. And a lot of that is financial, a lot of that is government. We certainly don't have, a government that gives us pensions. We don't have pensions and things like that, whereas in Europe and La Scala, and Paris Opera, you have pension for life, and, it's a bit different system. So, but I was proud and happy that I stayed in Canada and created a name for myself and a career, but it is ephemeral, and that's what's, heartbreaking sometimes, to think that that could have been the last show I did, or, so.
What would you miss, apart from the rhinestones and the makeup?
I'm wearing rhinestone underwear. No, well, just the communication with an audience, and sharing that and feeling that back and forth. I mean, that's so wonderful about being on the stage, is it's really your moment to be in control, and there's nothing else that, no one can walk in and go, well, you know what, it's your moment, and you're manipulating an emotion and feeling and controlling, and that's the thing that I miss about not being on the stage, if you know, and there will come a point when I just don't dance anymore, but I think I'll, you know, be doing something in some sort of capacity as a performer, and hopefully that'll be, you know, going into film and television or theater or Broadway, or because I think I have to perform. I mean, gonna dance, Broadway rhythm is taking me over. Hi, Dad. That's my dad over there. Hi, Vera.
Dave, it's been wonderful tonight being in the presence of such amazing talent. And Evelyn, personally for myself, to you, I just want to thank you for all the moments that have stood still for me watching you dance, my dear. And it's wonderful to hear you speak about it tonight. Thank you so much, so much.
Thank you, and that's a wrap on becoming Evelyn Hart. To the bar, David.
The last 10 years, the artistic directors of ballet companies have wanted ensemble companies and not individual stars, as they had when you guys were born, sort of, into the world of dance. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think a lot of that has come just for survival mode, because companies, you know, the theory being that if you put all your eggs in one basket, once that basket's gone, then you're screwed, because no one's going to come and see the company. They only want to see those people. But I myself go to see a movie because Brad Pitt's in it, or, you know, Angelina Jolie, or we all go to see names. So it's a double-edged sword, and I think that's what has happened, certainly with the Winnipeg Ballet. I mean, you would think of Winnipeg Ballet, you think of Evelyn Hart, but what happens if she's not there? Or Karen Kane or Rex Harrington, what happened to her? So I think, in a sense, the National certainly has become a much more modern company and a much more ensemble company. But when I joined the company, there were 72 dancers, and right now I think there's 45. They're trying to build it back up, and that's just an economic sort of thing. So I think it became survival mode for a while, but it also takes a very strong director to not be threatened by a name and an artist, and it's up to the public, in a sense, to demand that they, you know, when I first joined the company, casting was a year in advance with the principals' names. Then that slowly disappeared. Then it was just, come see the National Ballet, you know. So it's difficult, but I think it came down to economics in one sense.
And I also think it's a little bit about the state of classical ballet in Canada, because I remember John Meehan, when he took over the company, he said, you know, in the classics you have to have an interpreter in the lead role. In other ballets, you can have sort of a general company and the ballet will work. But if you do that in a classical ballet, if the person in the middle is not bringing that to life, if Giselle isn't alive, if Albrecht isn't alive, if Aurora and Prince Désiré are not bringing that extra thing, which is what, quote-unquote, is a principal dancer, then the ballet just falls flat. And ultimately, this is one of the things that I've been noticing, is of course it's much easier, in a sense, to go into sort of the more Broadway bound or the more modern things, because it takes a little bit, not a little bit, quite a lot less personality. I mean, not that it doesn't require personality, but you don't require the really strong personalities. And to do those big classical ballets, you know, you have to have evolved on not only a technical plane, but an emotional plane, and also a spiritual plane, in order to get those roles across. You have to be an actress, you have to do all of that stuff. Plus you have to have a partnership to be able to function. So from an economic point of view, it's much more difficult to keep classical ballet. I mean, with 3-month layoffs, 4-month layoffs that the dancers now have, how do you keep that technique and that art form going? And it's much easier then to sort of slip back into, but you'd be surprised at how many dancers really want to do classical ballet. That's what they started out wanting to do, and they still do want to do it. But it's becoming much more of a sort of a dinosaur, and I'm quite concerned about it, because for me, I think it's the ultimate test. And from there, if you can be a great classical dancer, I think you can do almost anything else.
Rex referred to this sort of trend toward no stars, all stars companies, and referred to the fact that it might have to do with problems of directors being challenged. Do you think there's something in that?
I think it's a I think there's a little bit of that, and a little bit of the fact that there's economics, and a little bit of the fact that it's, there's not enough time, and even in the school.
And may I advise, you're under oath and there is a camera.
That's right. So I really wouldn't say that it's one thing or another. I think it's a compound problem. And, it's really just sitting back and hoping that somehow that these things will evolve, because it's
It also goes in waves, though. It's also, there was the ballet boom, and then it dropped off, and then names come and go, and generations have to build. And right now, I think, certainly in Canada with the National Ballet, everyone is 22 years old. So once they all grow up, then you've got another group of, artists with minds that you have to fire as well. So it gets very complicated. And on that note, the bar is now open.
On that note, yes, friends. Thank you both very much. Two great names, great artists. Thanks for your generosity and time. And the bar, yes, Rex is open. Susen Mertens, who writes about dance, or has written about dance in Vancouver. My name is Max Wyman, and we have here, to my mind, the best, most outstanding ballet duo in the world. Yeah, well, we'll talk about that afterwards. I talked earlier on this week about the way that what makes these two special is the way they put their souls at risk in front of us. They lay themselves out bare in front of us. And in a minute, I want to get into talk about that. But first of all, I think Susan has a question she wants to bring up, which is a little more mundane.
Well, long time creative partnerships like this in the theater, there's sort of a rule of thumb that says the better the performance on stage, the worse the off-stage relationship. So I was just assuming these two aren't talking to each other tonight because it was just amazing on stage. But the other thing about a partnership is that, I want to know everything, right, about partnering. And I know this is a very keen audience, and there's a lot of young dancers here and dance studios. It's not something you normally get to choose, right? It's sort of like an arranged marriage. Somebody brought you together. So I want to know is, who brought you together? Who was the matchmaker? And was it like love at first sight, or did it take a while to develop trust? And it's not a monogamous relationship, because I know you've had, 28 Albrechts to your... she gets around. So, and as does Rex. So when they talk about partnering, they've got a lot of history that they can refer to. So I was hoping they'd share some of that with us tonight as well. So wherever you want to start.
I'll start with you. Start with me. What would you like to start with?
Oh, we got together.
I think originally we first danced together at the National Ballet in
Joyce
Sands put us together in St. Gwynedd and the Four Temperaments, and then from there the next thing we did together was Onegin. So you were you were my first attendant.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really how it all began, and now I want a divorce. As they say, all good things must come to an end. No, that's not true. So,
Did you click from the start?
yeah, I think we clicked from the start. Yeah, I think it was sort of instantaneous, and the way that we moved and approached it, and you know, she knew that I was the best thing that ever happened to her instantly.
I do remember hearing Anthony Dell say that he said, you know, if you come into it, it's always the first day that you work with a partner, you come into the studio and you can tell immediately whether or not you're going to have something in the future that's going to go beyond what it was. You know, it's just, and with Rex, it was quite amazing the first time he lifted me around the stage, you know, these gentes, and I just kind of floated, and I noticed that he just had an instinctive way of making it happen. And so he was able to sort of not only read the way I was moving, but also understanding where I needed to go, and made me look expanded, better. And of course, every ballerina wants that. But I was going to also say is that it isn't only the fact that we're put together. I mean, sometimes if you're dancing in a ballet company, you are sort of at the mercy of the artistic director in the sense that he will choose who you dance with. Sometimes you have a little bit of negotiation, but that's really how Rex and I have survived so long, is that, you know, if I've had any kind of invitation, and because I didn't really have a particular partner in Winnipeg, especially after Henny Arians retired and then was killed, really, once you discover somebody like Rex, you kind of, you know, you want to keep developing it, and you know that it's something special, and that's the thing you want to show the world. So, you know, you really do find moments that you can, and I constantly, even today, I mean, this whole thing is trying to find opportunities to work together. And so really we've tried to do that through the years, is try to keep that relationship going, even though we're not in the same company. And so it's kind of hard to get together for rehearsals.
Well, I probably had more of a career with you than anybody at the National. I mean, I danced with Karen Kay and I danced with certain people, but I think we've had the longest sort of relationship. And certainly, I mean, dancing with you, yeah, I wouldn't have had such an international sort of reputation because you invited me to Japan and all those places. And
Well,
I think that what was so unique, and Evelyn always gets upset when we go to these world galas, like she's not doing the pyrotechniques and all that stuff. And I said, well, we just slay them with our silent artistic interpretation, and we bring the right pieces that really blow people away, because anyone can do circus tricks. We try to find the subtleties of what's going on. But so I think that's what was always so special when we went away and did something and gave the audience something they hadn't quite seen before.
And I also think that with Rex, it's the depth of the partnership that I have.
But not tonight. Yes, we were a little distraught tonight at the end of the first PUDDA, as I heard backstage. That was crap. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Perfection never ends. Go ahead, tell them how distraught you are. Let it all out. Don't sit here and fawn all over me for the camera. Go ahead, tell them. We're talking about it for the next 3 days. That wasn't so good. You were count late. No, we finished the first PUDDA and lights went down. She went, well, that was crap. It really warms my heart, and I keep coming back for more. Sadomasochistic.
So what's the foundation of the moving together though? Is it the bodies, or is it hearing the music the same way?
Well, obviously we didn't hear it the same tonight. I thought I'd experiment. She didn't enjoy it. And I got a whole lecture about live music as compared to tape music backstage. Well, with the taped music, you should know where the beat's going to go. Why do you know? If it was live, I could understand. Perhaps you're feeling it differently, but there are spaces in tempo that you're wrong. And, you know, this is my life. She gets away with it because she's a woman. And I, unfortunately, put up with it.
It's just, I guess, I just speak up in my defense here. Is ultimately, no. The difficulty is this, is that I've always maintained that I do not mind any mistake if we rehearse. If you've done everything in your power to bring to the stage, then it's, but what's hard is if you know that there are things that can be avoided and they're not avoided. That's tough.
I was going to ask Evelyn, you told me once that you were allowed dancing with Rex because he was one of the few people who would look you in the eye when you were dancing.
Not tonight.
But you did. I mean, I was watching you.
I did, because I was looking at it like, I'm about to kill you. No, I thought it was great tonight. I mean, there was 3 things we missed, and I know that I will hear about that for the next 6 rehearsals, but that's okay.
But it had an edge tonight that you haven't had the other nights. The last piece. Was that because of this?
The last piece was great.
Oh, thank you. That's because I was making up the first piece.
And I love him for that.
Does it help you to know that we noticed nothing awry? We noticed nothing awry.
Of course
Does
you
that
did,
help?
but she did.
How
See,
about
I'm
you
more
know this
I'm with
people
you.
in the eye? Matching ideas, matching ideals, matching the heart.
About looking somebody in the eye, it's also a matter of interpretation, and I've always felt it's been very, very important that when I'm dancing, that I'm also real. So whatever role I do, whether it be Juliet, whether it be Giselle, whether it be Odette O'Dial, whatever it is, that there's a reality to it, there's a drama, a sense of theater that the audience is able to relate to, so that you can hold them and not give them 1 second where there's a moment for disbelief. So that if you can allow them to believe every single minute, which also is the reason why excuse me, that I work so hard for the technical, because if there's a little glitch technically, that allows the audience to break the bubble. And that's really what my obsession with perfection is. It's the fact that it is our job to take something and allow the audience to enter into that sort of on a super highway, say, and just continue the whole way until the destination, which is the emotional destination. And so
you're saying tonight we took a wrong turn and I got off at an exit?
No, not that at all. I'm just saying that ultimately, you become much more sensitive and much more aware of it in performance when it's not exactly as it is, because it's just you know the performance you want to give.
Yeah, but a lot of time that's your own inner voice. Don't listen to it.
That's inherent success.
I know, but they don't know what's going on.
But it's things that looking at someone in the eye, and that's been the whole point, is that it takes you. It's a different kind of technique. It requires you to have a sort of a dual-edged sword. One part of you is thinking about the technique, but you have to also allow that to be sort of automatic and be sort of like tick, 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 tick in the background, doing all the physical things, while the front part of your brain or what is engaged in the emotional. And so it's this constant balance between, and for a lot of dancers, it's really, because it's a different kind of technique, and it actually makes doing steps when you're looking somewhere else much more difficult physically. So it's taking the technique to that next step. So that's what's really what.
It's interesting though, Evelyn. I mean, tonight, the first piece, you said it was crap. I thought it was spectacular, and perhaps there was an edge that came out of your awareness of this little slip that wrecks me. This minute.
Where's the microscope?
Freshness.
CSI Miami couldn't find it.
No? That you play off that slight slip that you recognise but nobody else does, and you give the whole thing a freshness.
What slip?
I mean, I think it's ultimately each performance is going to be a different performance. There's no question. It's not, you're not trying to recreate the same performance every single night. It is supposed to be, but it's just for me, the fact is that every time something physical happens, it keeps it at that physical level. And what I would like to do is get past that point so that it's completely at an emotional level, so that therefore you're able to open the trap door and go deeper emotionally. Whereas as soon as you're having to concentrate, I mean, it's, as you say, it's not a big thing, it's a very personal thing. It's a little thing that sort of says to me, okay, you know that if you're doing 4, 5, 6 performances, not everyone's going to be perfect, and for every 5 performances you do, you might get one that you just think is perfect. But I guess it's also the fact that at this point in my life, where each performance becomes more important because there are less performances, and each performance I know is a gift, and each performance, you want every performance to be the maximum of what is possible. and not just to let it go, you know, to do everything I can. And it's not that it's terrible, and it's not that it's bad, it's just that you become very aware. My teacher once said to me, Evelyn, the higher level you go, the smaller the mistake, the more it shows. If you make 50 mistakes, they won't show because it's mistake. But if it's all very clean and all very pure and all very white, one mistake is glaring. And that's the thing, unfortunately, for poor Rex, is that he is brilliant, and sometimes he's capable of making this completely. So that's the difficulty for him too, is because I know what we are capable of, and so I'm very, you know, it's like the princess and the pea. It's like when you start working at that higher level, maybe no one else notices, but that's what takes us forward, and that's what I love about him, even though he finds it hard.
Mr. Harrington, in your defence?
No, what she said.
I want to ask you both about that.
Yeah, but the thing is, for me too, I tend to realize that I am human, and I'm not a machine, and I won't repeat the same performance every night, so I got over beating myself up a long time ago. And I think Evelyn likes to beat herself up a little more than I do. Not at all. Look at her, she's like,
Okay, let's go back to the technique. Maybe that's a safer area. No, we talked about this before. Rex always is going to be, I mean, anyone in his place is going to be responsible in our eyes as an audience member if there's a problem. We always assume that the man should have done something. I mean, in partnering in ballet, you know, Evelyn said, he made her look more expanded, and that's you know what she wanted. But you can't look better than you are if your partner isn't up to it. But if there's a mistake, he takes the stick for it too. So, is that reasonable? Is that the way partnering is? No. That 100% of the time or 90% of the time it's going to be the guy's fault, just like that.
in Evelyn's world, yes. In my world, no. No, it's just, you know, I mean, I think that I understand Evelyn's, compulsion to make everything perfect, and that's what makes her the artist she is. And it's not that I don't want to go there; it's just frustrating, you know, because for you, when you're partnering and you do the whole thing, and then one little tiny thing goes wrong, and it's crap. Then you go. That's all.
Okay,
it just gets difficult.
Let go of the little
I can't.
thing.
I can't. I'm very distraught. I gotta get there. Maybe I'm Paxil after tonight. Lithium. Okay. Does anyone else have a question that they'd like to ask?
Can I speak in defense of
No.
men?
Yes.
The two traditions are different. In Russia, the man is never wrong in partnering. And here, it's quite often the shoe is on the other foot. In Russia, it's the man directing. Oh no, you were off your bound. I mean, you know, our ballerinas very often try to say, yeah, but he didn't. You can't get away with that in Russia.
It's funny because Magdalena Popova, she's from Romania, and whenever I watch her coach, that's why I have to go in sometimes, because she actually makes it the girl's fault. And I watch the guy, and he's got her off her legs, so I can relate to it. I mean,
Because in Russia, they have to be able to do it by themselves without the partner.
yeah, well, they should be able to.
I mean, that's
Well,
the
Evelyn
school
does it
that's
by
for-
herself. She's amazing. I mean, I've danced
yeah.
with ballerinas who lean on you, and
That's
they're-
right. Oh yeah, Evelyn
unbelievable.
doesn't
you
need
know,
partner.
Yeah, Maximova really taught me too that, you know, I was doing too much, you know, but that was my training, sort of being able to fix things. And then when you work with different ballerinas, some ballerinas require, you know, being further forward, further back. If they're older, they need to make this line. If they're younger, then you need to lift them more. Or so you have to adapt to everybody. And you know, when I first worked with Carla Fracci, I mean, she was notorious for being difficult, and I was petrified. And within 3 minutes, she knew I could partner her, and she was sweet as gold to me. But to the other guy who was doing the secondary role, I mean, he was shaking in his boots, and he could do no right. So it just depends on who you're working with, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting because I worked with Peter Martins at one point. He was working on a putter that he created, and he was demonstrating something. And he looked at my partner and he said, "Let her do it. She's a good dancer." But what was phenomenal about him was that he would know exactly when you start and launch yourself into a step, and you thought, "Oh my God, I'm going to fall," and he would put his hand in at exactly the moment, and that started this whole thing of understanding that partnering is exactly that. It's assisting. It's not doing for one or for the other. And it's not fair for a woman either to sit there and expect the man to do everything for her. And what I found really has been the sort of secret to making a magical partnership is musicality, because that's your roadmap. Because you can't expect one person, I mean, as a woman in front of a partner, how can you know what the partner's going to do? You can't see him, you can't feel him, and you need to work on all those things in rehearsal. I remember I went once to Amsterdam, and there were some French dancers, and they were watching Lindsay Fisher and I do White Swan, and we worked on very specific things using just the wrists and just the minimal amount of partnering. And I remember the guy says, "Oh, that's amazing. You go." And then he goes, and then you go. And then he goes, and then you go. And then he goes, and then you go. Because they'd never really seen that, the fact that it was sort of really almost one-handed, sort of really this give and take, where I do what I need to do, he does what I have to do, and the two of us come together using the music as the sort of the glue that puts us together. And that's when it becomes the most amazing. I don't know, you may not have seen this in the first piece, this was actually brilliant. When Rex did this one particular turn, and you go like this step, and he turns, and all of a sudden it's like literally his hands on you.
Well, that was the brilliant section in the middle of the punta where I let you do your turn, and then I spun you with one hand. I caught you with
brilliant.
One hand, but
it is also you're requiring a partner who's willing to understand your technique. When I worked with Richard Craig and Anthony Dowell, who are two of the perhaps best male dancers in the world, partners, I was going to say that's one of the things that I was very young, and Richard Craig had said to me, he said, "Now, what do you want me to do here?" And I said, and that's just really what comes from it. And so ultimately, I think what one focuses on is that moment and that love and that passion much more than, oh, I've lost that moment. I mean, for me, I just sort of look at it and say it's my responsibility to do as much work as I can so that every moment is as full and as precious and as prepared and as perfect as possible. And then after that, that's the rest of it is sort of, and that's the thing about a partnership is that, it's like anything, it's a dual-edged sword, and you can't do one thing without the other. So.
Right, is this the formality thing?
The fact that it doesn't last, well, considering I sort of stepped down from the National, or was let go, or I'm not there anymore, however we like to interpret that. Yeah, I didn't even think I would be doing these shows. So, the fact that this came up, and we're doing some more shows, and we're maybe going to work with Roberto. So at one point when I had stopped from the National, I really thought, oh, is that it? And what am I going to do? And who am I if I'm not doing this? And so the shrink bills get really big because because it really does become part of your life. And even answering the phone, I go, "Hi, I'm Rex Harrington, National Ballet of Canada." And now it's like, "Hi, I'm Rex Harrington." Like, who is that? So, dancing is your life, and that's something that you have to readjust to. But this has given me sort of, an almost feeling to get myself back into shape and get myself going, because I feel like, I let myself go for a bit, and I've heard about that from Evelyn too. It's cruel. So yeah, it's a bit difficult to let go of it. So, and I have to decide whether I'm going to have one foot in, one foot out, or what I'm going to do. But that's the cruel nature of this art form, is that you go into it as a young child and you never think, A, you're going to make it to a certain level, B, it's going to last, because we all know there's no longevity, C, there's really not a lot of money to be made in it. My joke is that Doug Gilmore, who played hockey, retired at 40, so did I. I mean, the zeros in his bank account, I go on beyond my 2, he's got 9 or whatever, so he can live forever on that, so I'll be working at McDonald's soon. But, I'll open a plant store. It's sad, really. Yeah, no, it's an ephemeral thing, and it's cruel, but that's why we're doing these shows.
Each performance is ephemeral, and you put so much into
but that's what's so great about it. It's and that's why I don't really, I can get upset when things are different or variation, but that's what I love about it, is that I don't want to recreate exactly every night. There was a time when I was younger, I beat myself up a lot more, but then I thought, that moment's gone and I can't change it, so I'm not going to sit there and beat myself up, and maybe next time I'll think about it. And I think sometimes, like today, we were in rehearsal and Evelyn was getting nervous with certain things, and so then for herself, she starts picking on it, and then what happens as a partner is I think, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and then when I get to the moment, I try to do 6 corrections at once, and then it really goes. So sometimes for me, it's better to be left alone in the moment and let me do naturally. So I think tonight I was thinking, because before the curtain we were touching little things, and so I get really messed up, because a lot of it's instinct. And now I'm just rambling. Should we go have a drink? Is the bar open?
One
Is
more
there any
question.
questions?
Actually, it's more of a comment, and that is that I really appreciate both the forces that are acting here, because with your partnership, she can be very feminine and light and graceful, and it brings out the masculine, and it works very well. It's quite beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very much. It's been a real treat this week.
Thank you.
Quite special for us all.
It's such a great space too, and the audience has been great, and thank you all for coming.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
It was a great time.